I'm Grace Harper, 28, and I will never forget the moment I limped into that Denver courtroom, the sharp click of my crutches echoing off the polished floor. My heart raced as I faced my family, seated smugly, convinced they had already won. Their eyes widened when they saw me standing tall, despite the searing pain in my leg. But it was the woman beside me who made my father leap from his seat, his face pale, shouting, "Oh my God, it's her." The room froze. They had thought they buried my future in that hospital bed, leaving me alone in a coma, abandoned as if I were nothing. They believed they could steal everything I had worked for, my $10 million contract, the crowning achievement of my life. But they were wrong. If it were you, would you make them pay, or would you give them a chance to make things right? Comment below, and let's debate. It all started months before that courtroom showdown. I had just stepped out of a sleek Denver office tower, hands trembling as I clutched the signed contract. 10 million. My AI algorithm, a breakthrough in medical diagnostics, had secured a deal with a major healthcare corporation. Years of late nights, endless coding, and pushing past doubt had finally paid off. I was 28, a software engineer at the peak of my career, and I couldn't wait to share the news with my family. Driving to our suburban home, pride swelled in my chest, imagining their faces lighting up. I was wrong. The moment I stepped through the front door, my sister sat at the kitchen table, her eyes narrowed. She was 32, a project manager at my company, always polished, always in control. But that day, something was off. I held up the contract, grinning. I did it. $10 million for my algorithm. Her lips twitched, not in a smile, but a grimace. Your algorithm? She snapped. You mean the one I've been overseeing? The one I pushed through meetings? Her voice dripped with venom, and I froze. I had always known she was competitive, the golden child who earned our parents' praise while I scrambled for scraps of approval. But this was different. This was rage. I tried to explain the algorithm was my work, my code, my sleepless nights. She rose, dragging her chair across the floor, stepping closer. You think you're better than me, don't you? She hissed. I backed away, hands raised. This isn't about you, I said, my voice trembling. We were at the top of the stairs now, arguing, her face inches from mine. You're nothing without me, she spat, and in a flash, she shoved me. My foot caught air. The world spun as I tumbled down the wooden steps. Pain exploded in my head, my body crashing down, then darkness. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed, the steady beeping of machines filling the silence. My head throbbed, my leg ached, and a nurse's voice cut through the fog. You're awake, she said softly. I blinked. How long? I croaked. 2 weeks, she replied, eyes kind but guarded. 2 weeks in a coma. I asked about my family, my sister, my parents. The nurse hesitated. No one's been here. Your parents called once early on, but they haven't come. My chest tightened. I expected my sister to stay away after what she'd done. But my parents? I thought of my father, always distant, and my mother, always siding with her favorite daughter. Did they say anything? I asked, dreading the answer. The nurse looked away. They said you brought this on yourself, that you shamed them. I stared at the ceiling, the words cutting deeper than the fall. My own parents dismissing me like I was nothing. I thought of the contract, my moment of triumph, now overshadowed by my sister's jealousy. She hadn't just pushed me down the stairs, she had tried to erase me. And my parents, the people who should have been at my bedside, had turned their backs. I clenched my fists. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the betrayal in my heart. Days dragged on. The hospital room felt like a cage, walls closing in as I lay there, aching from the fall. No one from my family came. Not my parents. Not my sister. I kept glancing at the door, hoping for someone to care, but it remained shut. The nurses moved quietly, their routines a blur. I was left alone with the sting of their betrayal. I had always been the outsider, overshadowed by my sister's charm. But their absence now cut deeper than ever. I wondered if they even knew I was awake, or if they simply didn't care. One morning, my sister appeared without warning. She stood at the edge of my bed, arms folded, a smirk twisting her face. "Still clinging to life, huh?" she said, voice sharp and cold. "You're holding everyone back, you know." Pain flared in my leg as I tried to shift, glaring at her. "Why are you here?" I asked, throat tight. She leaned closer, eyes glinting. "Just making sure you stay out of my way," she said, then straightened and walked out, her footsteps echoing. Her words weren't just cruel, they were calculated. They carried a weight, like she was guarding a secret. I clenched the bedsheet, my anger simmering. She wasn't just mocking me. She was plotting something. Later that week, my best friend slipped into the room, her face drawn with worry. She hugged me gently, careful not to jostle my injuries, and sat beside me. "I've been fighting to see you," she said softly. "The hospital kept me away until now." Relief surged through me. Her presence was a lifeline in that lonely place. Then she dropped a bomb. "Your sister's been talking at work," she said, eyes narrowing. "She's telling everyone she's taking over your $10 million contract, acting like it's hers." My stomach churned. My algorithm, the one I had built from scratch, was being claimed by her. She was saying she'd made it all happen. My friend's voice tightened with disgust. The realization hit hard. My sister wasn't just gloating. She was trying to steal my legacy. That night, I grabbed my phone, wincing as my fingers fumbled across the screen. I needed to check my bank account, hoping to cover some hospital costs and regain a shred of control. The app loaded, and a red alert flashed. "Account frozen." My heart pounded. I called the bank, voice shaking. The representative's words chilled me. "A court order froze your funds. It cites concerns about your ability to manage them." Ability. I had just woken from a coma, fighting to survive, and someone was trying to label me incompetent. My sister's visit, her smug confidence and boasts at work, clicked into place. Everything was starting to make sense. This wasn't just abandonment. A week later, a stranger entered my hospital room. He introduced himself as my lawyer, a man in his 30s, sharp-eyed, calm. He carried a thick folder and sat beside my bed, expression serious. "I'm here about your contract," he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. My heart raced as I scanned them. Legal forms stamped and official, declaring me incapacitated, unable to manage my own affairs. My signature was scrawled at the bottom, but I had never signed them. These documents were filed to transfer my $10 million deal. "Someone's trying to take everything," he said, tone steady but grim. I gripped the papers, mind spinning. My sister's smirk from her hospital visit flashed in my head. This had her name all over it. I asked how he had found me. "A colleague at your company, worried about your absence, hired me to investigate," he explained. "The court order freezing your bank account was just the start. These documents claim you're unfit to work based on your medical records." Disbelief turned to dread. My medical records? I had barely been awake a week, and someone was already rewriting my story. The lawyer leaned forward, voice low. "We need to dig deeper, but this looks deliberate." I nodded, anger rising. My sister wasn't just trying to steal my contract, she was trying to erase my competence, my identity. That afternoon, a doctor came to see me. In her 40s, face kind but resolute, she introduced herself as the one who'd overseen my care. "I found something troubling," she said, pulling up my chart on a tablet. "Your medical records were altered after you were admitted." My breath caught. She pointed to entries showing extended sedation and exaggerated neurological issues, none matching my recovery. "Someone added these to make it look like you'd never wake up," she said, eyes meeting mine. "It's why the court order went through so fast." I felt a chill. This wasn't just about money. It was about keeping me out of the picture permanently. As I lay there, the pieces started to connect. My sister had always been controlling. I remembered her at 6, snatching my favorite doll and claiming it as hers, smirking as our parents praised her assertiveness. By 10, she had mastered turning their attention away from me, convincing them I was the problem. As teenagers, she manipulated every family decision from vacation plans to who got the bigger room, always painting me as selfish. My parents never questioned her. They adored her charm and confidence. I had spent years trying to prove myself, building my AI algorithm to show I was more than her shadow. But now, she had taken it to a new level, orchestrating a plan to strip me of everything I'd earned. I looked at my lawyer, then the doctor, their faces steady with determination. They believed in me even when my own family didn't. The forged documents, the altered records, it was all my sister, with my parents likely turning a blind eye as always. I thought of her boasts at work, her cruel words in the hospital. She thought she'd won, that I'd stay broken, but she had underestimated me. I handed the papers back to my lawyer, voice firm. "We're fighting this." He nodded, a spark in his eyes. The doctor promised to document every discrepancy in my records. I wasn't just fighting for my contract. I was fighting for my life. Determined, I took a bold step. Weak but fueled by anger, I checked out of the hospital against advice and arranged to meet my sister at a quiet Denver cafe. I tucked a small recorder into my pocket, heart pounding as I limped through the cafe door. She was already there, sipping coffee, posture relaxed, eyes sharp. "You're up," she said, mocking. "Didn't think you'd make it." I forced a smile, playing along, and asked about work. "The contract's moving forward," she said, leaning back with a smirk. "Someone had to step up since you're indisposed." I pressed her, keeping my voice casual. "You mean my contract?" Her laugh was cold. "It's mine now. You weren't going to make it happen from a hospital bed." I clenched my jaw. The recorder was capturing every word. She had just admitted her plan to steal my $10 million deal. Back at my temporary apartment, I met with the private investigator my lawyer had recommended. She was in her late 30s, sharp and no-nonsense, with a knack for uncovering secrets. "I've been digging into your sister's finances," she said, spreading bank statements across the table. My breath caught as she pointed to a series of payments, large sums wired to a colleague at my company. "This man," she said, tapping a name, "received $10,000 from your sister's account." I recognized the name, a colleague who'd always been too eager to please her. "He's been forging company documents," the investigator continued, "making it look like your sister was the lead on your algorithm." My blood boiled. She wasn't just taking credit, she was paying to rewrite history. Later that day, my best friend called, urgency in her voice. "I found something you need to see," she said, forwarding a chain of internal company emails. I opened them, eyes scanning rapidly. One email, "With Grace out, I'm stepping in to replace her. The contracts are in good hands." Another bragged about her vision for the algorithm as if I'd never existed. My hands shook. Each word was a betrayal. "She's been planning this for weeks," my friend added. "Everyone at work thinks she's the hero." I thanked her, resolve hardening. These emails were proof that my sister was trying to erase me from my own success. Determined to leave no stone unturned, I called the hospital administration office. Haunted by the doctor's warning about my altered records, I needed answers. The administrator, brisk and precise, confirmed my fears. "There's evidence of unauthorized changes," she said, pulling my file. "Entries were added to exaggerate your condition, suggesting you be incapacitated for months." I asked who had access. She hesitated, then admitted, "Only a few staff members, but we are investigating an external request that came through a legal channel." My mind flashed to my sister's connections, her ability to manipulate. This wasn't just about the contract, it was about keeping me locked in a false narrative of frailty. With evidence in hand, I prepared for battle. I sat across from my lawyer in his Denver office, a cluttered room filled with legal books and case files. "We're building a strong case," he said, voice steady. "We'll file a lawsuit charging fraud and conspiracy to deprive you of your contract." I nodded, fingers tracing the edge of the table, chest tight. Going to court means facing my family, the people who betrayed me, without a second thought. Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "The recording is key. In Colorado, one-party consent is legal. Your cafe conversation with your sister is admissible." I exhaled, relieved. My risky move would hold up in court. He explained we'd present the recording alongside the emails my friend uncovered, proving my sister's intent to steal my $10 million deal. We'll also call the doctor who reviewed your medical records, he added. Her testimony will prove the alterations were deliberate. Hope surged, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed down. This wasn't just about winning, it was about confronting the family I'd once trusted. Later, I met with Dr. Price in a hospital conference room. Calm posture, serious expression. I've prepared a detailed statement, she said, sliding a folder my way. It confirms the unauthorized changes to your records, entries added to exaggerate your coma and suggest permanent incapacity. I flipped through her notes, heart racing. The evidence was clear. Someone had tried to paint me helpless to justify stripping me of my rights. I'll testify to every discrepancy, she said firmly. This wasn't an accident. Her words bolstered my resolve, but also stirred buried emotions. Memories of my family's favoritism flooded back. I saw my sister at family dinners, always the center of attention, her stories earning my parents' smiles while my achievements went unnoticed. I remembered winning a science fair at 15, only for my mother to praise my sister's art project instead. My father would nod along, dismissing my efforts as impractical. Their constant preference for her had pushed me to work harder on my algorithm, to prove I was enough. Now, even in the face of my survival, they sided with her again, letting her manipulate my life. The sting of their rejection hit like a tidal wave, threatening to drown my courage. I stopped at a park near the courthouse, needing air. The cold bit through my coat as I sat on a bench, letting myself feel the hurt. This fight wasn't just about my contract, it was about the truth, about the years I had spent proving myself. The day of the trial arrived. The Denver courtroom buzzed with tension as I sat beside my lawyer, hands clasped tightly in my lap. Daniel stood, voice clear and commanding, addressing the judge. We have undeniable evidence of a conspiracy to defraud my client. He began presenting the recording from the cafe, where my sister had admitted to stealing my $10 million contract. Her smug voice echoed through the courtroom. It's mine now. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Daniel followed with the forged company documents, showing how my sister and a colleague had falsified records to claim my algorithm. I glanced at her across the room, her face pale but defiant. Next, Daniel introduced bank statements revealing payments my sister had made to Mark, a colleague who now sat rigid in his seat. These transactions prove collusion, Daniel said, tone unwavering. He handed the judge a folder of emails my best friend had uncovered, messages in which my sister bragged about replacing me. Each piece of evidence stacked neatly against her, airtight. Then Dr. Price took the stand. Calm and precise, she presented the altered medical records. Entries exaggerating Ms. Harper's condition were added, she explained, holding up charts. False entries suggested permanent incapacity, used to justify the court order against her. The judge's eyes narrowed. I felt a spark of hope. The truth was unraveling. My sister stood to defend herself, voice sharp but unsteady. I was protecting the company, she claimed, glancing nervously at the judge. Grace was unstable, unfit to lead. Her lies stung, but they crumbled under scrutiny. Mark followed, stammering through his defense. I was just following orders, he muttered, avoiding my gaze. His weak excuse only deepened the judge's frown. I watched my parents in the gallery. Shock and denial painted their faces. My mother clutched my father's arm, lips trembling. My father stared ahead, his usual cold demeanor cracking. For years, they had enabled my sister, but now their complicity was laid bare. Daniel called me to testify. Heart-pounding, I took the stand. I spoke of my algorithm, the years of work poured into it, and the betrayal of being pushed down the stairs. I described waking in the hospital, abandoned by my family, and discovering their plot to strip me of everything. They had assumed I'd stay silent. I said, voice steady despite the ache in my chest, but I'm here for justice. The courtroom went silent, the weight of my words sinking in. My sister glared, her confidence fading. My parents looked away, unable to meet my eyes. For the first time, I felt the power shift. The judge deliberated, minutes stretching like hours. Finally, she delivered her verdict. The evidence is overwhelming, she said, voice firm. The defendant orchestrated a calculated scheme to defraud Miss Harper of her intellectual property and financial rights. She sentenced my sister to 4 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Mark received 2 years for his role in forging documents. I exhaled, relief washing over me, but the judge wasn't done. As for the parents, she continued, their involvement in enabling this scheme warrants a civil lawsuit for damages. My mother gasped, burying her face in her hands. My father's shoulders slumped, his authority shattered. As the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift. The courtroom emptied, but I stayed, watching my family leave in disgrace. My sister's defiant mask had cracked. Her eyes were hollow. Mark shuffled out, had bowed. My parents, once dismissive, now faced the consequences of their favoritism. I had fought for my truth, and I had won. The contract was mine again, my name restored. But more than that, I had reclaimed my strength. I walked out of the courthouse, the Denver sky bright above me, ready to rebuild my life. With justice served, a new chapter began. In my new apartment, a small but sunlit space with windows overlooking the city skyline, the walls were bare, but they held promise. A fresh start, free from the shadows of my family's betrayal. I had made the decision to cut all ties. No calls, no visits, no more hoping for their approval. My sister, my parents, they were part of a past I no longer needed. The freedom of that choice felt like breathing for the first time in years. The legal consequences had been severe. My sister was serving 4 years in prison, her ambition reduced to a cell, and ordered to pay me $200,000 in restitution. Mark, her accomplice, faced 2 years behind bars and a $20,000 fine. My parents, complicit in their silence, were hit with a civil judgment for $75,000. Their reputation crumbled, their once proud status eroded by their own choices. I didn't gloat. I felt no joy in their downfall, only relief that they could no longer hurt me. But I wanted to do more than rebuild my own life. The pain of betrayal, of being left alone in a hospital bed, had shown me how many others might face similar struggles. I took a bold step, investing $500,000 from my contract earnings into a Denver-based foundation for victims of familial abuse. The fund would provide legal aid, counseling, and safe housing for those escaping toxic families. At the launch event, I spoke to a small crowd, my voice steady. No one should feel alone in their fight. The words carried my own scars. The foundation was my way of turning pain into purpose, ensuring others had the support I had lacked. As I settled into my new home, I reflected on the journey. My family had tried to erase me, my sister with her schemes, my parents with their indifference, but their actions only made me stronger. I had fought through a coma, uncovered their lies, and faced them in court. Each step had been a battle, from recording my sister's confession to presenting evidence with my lawyer. I had learned that justice wasn't just about winning. It was about standing up. Even when the odds seemed impossible, my algorithm, my pride, was back in my hands, and I was already planning its next phase, determined to make it bigger than ever. The biggest lesson wasn't about revenge or triumph. It was about self-reliance. For years, I had sought my family's validation, chasing their love through achievements they ignored. But in that hospital bed, abandoned and betrayed, I found something better, my own strength. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. Kindtree had carried me through the pain, the lies, the courtroom. It had taught me that no one could take my future unless I let them. As I looked out over Denver, the city lights sparkling below, I knew I was enough. I was ready to build a life on my terms, one where no one could hold me back.